So why don't we get started? Renfei, do you mind kicking us off for demoing very quickly the
Yeah, for sure.
testing?
Let me on my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, so just recently I added a feature to a GitHub action to run the TKG test. I've been adding some TKG test in the TKG repo in the past half a year now. So it covers some like basic features such as like testing the platform requirements, the so I can show the so it covers this kind of basic examples like testing the hierarchy of TKG to see if it can find the build list, something like that. So now I enabled a action build based on the TKG test. So from now on in the PR, if the change, if it touches any like TKG code such as Java code, we'd better just run this command. We do run TKG dash test. Then the GitHub action will trigger the TKG test. In this example, it triggers this test workflow, and in the end, it says it will either say it's successful or it's failed, or sometimes it's aborted. So if we follow the link, that's the workflow run. Then we can click here to see if that's a failure. We can click here to see what's going on. Probably it will fail at this run script, and we'll see a red cross here. And for this successful case, we'll see everything test successfully. And we can also append some TKG test options. A useful option is -v, just to see the verbose output. So it will, instead of we just see a clean output here, for each test, we will see run the TKG and what's the test output and all the verbose output. So yeah, so that's the demo that I have today.
Very nice. And I guess it's important if I think many of us are committers, therefore doing reviews in this TKG repo. It's important to note that this is what we want to be doing before merging anything into this repo. If there are changes to, can you just show the folder again, Renfei, of the actual source code?
So any change inside
into this, yeah.
We definitely need to check. We check it, and sometimes changes in these make files.
Right.
Better to check it as well. Yeah.
And so it doesn't actually hurt us to run it, even if we don't.
Yeah.
If there are changes, even in examples where someone adds a new test, we'll want to run it.
Yes. So it doesn't hurt. It runs very quickly. Just takes about a minute to finish. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So here is a -v output. So it will show the test output. It will be very verbose, but we can see what happened, what's going on. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Do people have questions for Renfei on this? And thanks. This creates a nice pattern to follow, so that you're encouraging people to write more tests and put them into the examples folder.
So now I'm working on this allow user to specify the OS label, KG. So while I'm working on that, I will also have a test change in the example. So this provides an example for user to follow. And also when I have my PR ready, I can directly run the TKG test in my PR to show that it's actually working.
Yeah, that's just great. Very good. Thank you, Ramfe. Anyone with questions or comments there? And I guess the people who don't get to join this call because they're in different time zones, I might actually send a note to the Slack channel, just letting them know the expectation when reviewing. So all the other committers, I'll try to make sure that they're aware and they can refer to this recording after.
Yes, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Ramfi. Great.
I will stop.
Sure, yeah. And then over to Mesbah for a quick note about some of your work on an epic that we recently created.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to say a few words to that, Mesbah.
Yeah. I just started sharing.
Yeah, great. We can see it. Yeah.
Okay. So starting from the epic, so we created this epic to handle a lot of cases where we need an additional SDK for testing purposes or some other purposes, like we sometimes need Windows installer or Linux installer testing, and for RIJVM for JCK testing and Jerry, etc. So currently what I'm working on is, I'm gonna scroll down to this table here. So this is the case that I'm currently working on. So basically this means enable, so basically we are adding a new option in our builds saying additional artifacts required, and it can assume these values. So it can assume RIJDK installer, test image, etc. So what I'm working on right now is getting the second from the top, this particular use case implemented, where we set RIJDK as the value for additional artifacts required. And when it's set, it basically expects an RIJDK link supplied in customized SDK URL along with whatever else that it's there. And then it just makes sure it downloads it and places it in a proper location that's recognizable by the tests that are going to later on use it. I have an example. So quickly showing, so this is a grinder I used to test my PR. So here we have this field, text field, additional artifacts required, and it has this value. And also in my customized SDK URL, I have this additional JDK that I want to be treated as RIJDK to be downloaded. So I supplied this path along with the test JDK path and JRE path and image path or whatever else that would typically be part of this value. So once this is set, and if we run the test, what it's going to do is it's going to download the RIJDK along with the rest of the downloads, expand it, and it's gonna recognize which one is the RIJDK, and it's gonna place it into the place where we want to put it, which is, for our case, it's a folder called additional JDK binary, in which it's gonna expand it and place it. And it's also gonna define this environment variable called RIJDK home that we're gonna subsequently use in the test. So I have to, so basically this is still being tested. So we're still testing to make sure that all platforms work fine.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Mesbah. And I will note, I'm gonna update this issue to add the word epic in front of the name of the title, because we'll probably break this out into multiple, thank you, multiple PRs and kind of consume it like eating a sandwich in many, many bites. But thanks for taking the lead on it, because I think for the installer cases and some other stuff that we see, that we'll follow this same pattern.
Right.
And for Jerry testing, which we already support, I think I'll just shift over to using the additional artifacts required parameter, which means I can drop using the use Jerry Boolean. So what we're hoping for the stuff that's already supported, like Jerry testing and test images and such, eventually we can do a code cleanup thing where we remove some parameters, although it's not required by it. We might want to do that as part of a technical debt code cleanup work. But yeah, I did list them here, or we listed them here, just so that they would be captured as a potential work item, especially for students or people who are coming to the project. But yeah, this first piece of work is really laying the groundwork for the rest of us to follow. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did people have questions on this topic or comments? If not, I guess, I will comment. Can you slide back down to that table just briefly, Mesbah?
Yeah.
Noting that, and if you probably have to slide over to see the, I had put some questions and then made a statement about, for now, we will say not support it. If people are looking at this item and already identifying that there are some gotchas, what if, because there's a lot of different paths that may end up happening with this little epic. One of them could be, what if we have entries in that customized SDK URL that point to two separate servers, each with needing their own credentials to log into? At the moment, I'm going to say we don't have that use case, and so we're not going to support having then multiple SDK URL credential IDs. I think the way we'll approach some of these will be cross that bridge if we come to it. But I do still want to call them out as gotchas or things so that people know we have thought about some of these scenarios and we're just proactive, or we're explicitly deciding to not support it for now. So just, if I bring this up in case people already know or can think of other potential questions that we should think about and either say, yes, let's handle that case, or no, we're not going to handle that case. But this way, when I'm working on documentation, I can explicitly call out not supported.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks again. That's great. So we have any questions fielding around that piece? I know we have like a bazillion parameters now, so any attempt to reduce the number is also great. We'll see.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. I'm gonna go now and grab I'll share screen. So we've got the first couple of pieces here we talked about. I do want to quickly mention our Google Summer of Code proposals, because both of them have aspects, large pieces or large aspects to do with improving how we test and improving how we use resources. So I'm just going to open I guess I'll open this wiki page here. GSOC term. Yeah. So this is one of them, and it relates to an issue that I think, Lan, you already opened, and we've been talking about for a long time. And in fact, before we even begun, or at the very beginnings of having an AQAvit project, we talked about the desire to be having metrics that we use to measure the effectiveness and efficiency of our testing. So I'm gonna, as we go forward, and I think I've tagged a few of you now already as mentors, and welcome others to participate as well. Taking a look at some of the stuff that we know we could easily gather, plus some of the stuff that we had done in the past that we could revive out of prototypes, and also just the state of the art in the current ecosystem, like looking around in software development today, what are some of the tools and processes that are currently being used to measure the effectiveness? So we know pit test exists. We know you could inject defects and measure the effectiveness of testing. What other ways are people doing this? And then let's have an intern kind of start to do some of that work, gather the metrics, and hopefully come out of it by creating a framework that we judge and measure the value of our tests, and then use that framework in a regular basis to make decisions about what tests get added to the AQAvit suite, what tests should be removed from it. So we're hoping to get part of the way there in this Google Summer of Code proposal. And now, bearing in mind, we don't know if the proposal will be accepted yet, but we've put that forward as one of them. And yeah, I guess if people have notes, comments, or questions, feel free to either add them to the wiki page that I was just sharing, or the open issue that's linked from the wiki page. Either place is great. The other proposal is actually not held or described in Aquatests at the moment because it also has an infrastructure piece. So I put it up in the Adoptium repository as a wiki page. So this one will be looking at how we optimize the use of our test node resources. And it would involve a lot of the stuff that we already supply from TRSS and such, where we can measure and easily measure test execution time. Well, there's an API that can be pulled. I give an example of using the TRS API in this repo, but the infrastructure piece of this will also be to look at machine idle time and how heavily our machines are being used and where there's downtime or waste. And the hopeful outcome of this one will be to say, is there a way, are we leveraging some of the features we currently have? And we have Renfe on the call and Lan on the call at the moment for dynamic parallelism and dynamic compile, for example. Are we leveraging them at the moment, or is there a better way we should lay out how we're running our tests at the project to be able to test more and more quickly and with maybe less complexity? So what different ways can we take the features we have and the way we test and apply them at the project? So this would be having an intern try some of those things and then measure the actual, develop the KPIs and measure how we're doing with different approaches. But again, we'll also look at the state of the art and the best practices around the software development world and check that we're actually doing most of those. And again, I've tagged a few of you. Same set almost. We're adding Scott in to help with infrastructure piece. And so this is the other proposal, just so everyone's aware. Did anyone have questions about that or comments? We'll try to get back to our actual, yeah, that was what I was going to mention here. And then we have 9 minutes left. And this was just to call out that I think we have some nice PRs from actually some Microsoft folks, one in the Aquatest tools repo from George to bring in initial support for querying ASDO. And I think that's still pending a review or needs some more eyes on it. Plus we have, if I look in this repo, a few coming in, one for supporting SpecJBB. That might have already just gone in. Let me double check. That one I think did get merged, and it's marked right now to be vendor specific, but I wanted to make sure people were aware of it. Sorry, I'll just look it up so I can find the actual PR. I wanted to make people aware of it in case for vendors who have licenses to run this performance benchmark. You merely would have to edit the playlist, which would be here, to add your vendor information to be able to run this and point it at your particular install of spec JBB. So if they're making sure that people know that this has now been added as a supported perf benchmark, and there were already there's already support for spec JBB in TRSS. We just don't run it at the project because we at the open source project don't have a license for that test material. And finally, I do want to mention thanks for a piece of work that we're working through with Alibaba for being able to not just use our RISC-V test nodes, but potentially spin up and support running of those tests inside of Docker containers. We're still working through it. I'm probably not the right person to give final review, so I'm thanking Sophia for stepping in and giving some reviews. The caveat that I think we're hitting here now is we're trying to use the software.tool.docker tag to direct tests to a machine with Docker installed, but at the same time we have no RISC 5 machines with Docker installed, so it would redirect right now to any platform that had it installed, which means when we lay down the test JDK home, that binary, we immediately have a problem because it's a RISC-V piece that we're trying to use. And we're not doing this like we do with external tests where we can say, use the installed Java that's inside the container at the moment. So we'll probably need to think about how we want to handle this, because I could imagine that we might want to do this for other things. So just to say, this is a work in progress, and poor Accelerator 1996 bearing with us as we try to approach it from different angles. But if anyone has an interest in weighing in on this review, please do. I don't know if it affects anyone else at the moment, but I think it'll be a nice to have once it's in. That's it, except now I think we have AOB, and I know we have Joe on the call as well, so I do want to bring forward what we talked about in the last call, which was Joe sharing some of the updates he's made for making running the AQAvit verification suite as a workflow. I did, as my action from last call, create this issue because I think there's a few pieces we want to discuss or decide upon. One is take the stuff that's in the Aquifer repository or from Joe's branch of it, and probably move it into this repository. So I do want to have a discussion about that and ask people what their thoughts are. What would be the right place to put this piece of work? And by this, I mean, this is a way to be able to use GitHub Actions to run the 9 targets defined within that test.env properties file, but run them on GitHub runners. And some of the enhancements that Joe had demonstrated was the ability for vendors or anyone who had their own, I guess it's self-hosted GitHub runners, for them to be able to set those up, because if they were running this internally, they would want to use their pool of machines rather than the ones that come kind of for free. Am I missing stuff, Joe? The run in parallel support, obviously we want that. And then the knock-on of that would be, can we update run Aqua to be able to do that in a less clunky way? So to be able to pass in the number as a parameter of how many machines you'd want to run in parallel, rather than have to kind of set it up carefully and in a clunkier way to say, if I want to run across 5 machines, then I actually have to kind of structure my YAML file to do that ahead of time. Maybe there's a more elegant way for us to do that, although I'm not sure what YAML allows for in terms of looping and stuff like that. So that's why it would probably need to go into the GitHub action, the run Aqua GitHub action, I guess. And then that last one, I've been thinking about that quite a bit. This piece that came up, opinionated ways to together workflows and passing from one workflow to another. And the question around, is there a way for me to check that I'm actually running against the JDK binary that I actually want to then publish? Like, can we work into this workflow a check for whether the tap files all look right and the contents point to the right Java? And I alluded to, I think this tap verification doesn't necessarily belong here under the Jenkins folder. It could go up under scripts, because it's this particular shell script is useful also in the GitHub action work case. I know you put it here, Lan, because it was kind of useful for our Jenkins story, but because this runs as a standalone, you've created it, Lan, as a standalone. It could probably get moved up into scripts here under a tap verification. And that way, when we do add the Aquifer workflows into our workflows folder, they can pull it there. They don't have, I mean, they could still pull it from the Jenkins folder too, but just a little bit of tidy up.
Yeah,
I'll stop talking.
we should be there. I think as a matter of fact, all the script that we have, including the get.sh,
all of these that showed up, I didn't get in on this review, but if I had seen it, I would have said, please put it in here. So all of these, it would be nice to not keep putting scripts all over the place. So yeah,
right.
Maybe we reorg and move things into here. Yeah. Anyway, just wanted to call out that script because that would be the one, Joe, that I think would be helpful to call to check the tap files prior to publish. And this one is also the script that I think we would want to add additional functionality into. Right now, it verifies the contents of the tap files, makes sure things are passing. If they aren't, it gives a report about what's not passing. But additionally, there can be a check that all of the Java version information that's inside tap files, one, match to each other or make sense. And then you could also even pass in a parameter that says, I want it to match against this Java information or this release info information. And if it doesn't, then it should exit in error with some information. So I believe I have open issue to augment this as well. Lan, you had added some pieces for other features that we can put in there. I think we're at time, but and I feel like I talked too much and didn't stop. Sorry.
No. Those are important. I just want to add one more point. Maspa and I was in a meeting with the current release team, and they were wondering what are the new features that we have added recently.
Mm,
I told them to join this meeting because
Yeah.
there are a lot of features that we add,
yeah,
and it's hard to, it's better for them to join the meeting directly to see the demos and stuff and ask questions. So
yeah.
I will
And I think the other note you can share with them is I always tag the AQAvit meetings with the AQAvit label or the AQAvit meeting label, and
Mhm.
all the recordings are linked inside those GitHub issues. So not that anyone ever goes back to watch a recording, but I know some of the Alibaba team watch because they're not in a time zone that is very good for joining this call. So I think it's important we keep recording stuff. And if that's the same for the current release team, they can go and look at all that. But maybe in my documentation overhaul, I could create a better search for people to find which issue shows which features, or where to find the recordings, or where to find more demos about each feature that's being added.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I don't have anything else. Did anyone have any other business they wanted to add? I just think it's an exciting time. There's lots of people bringing really good stuff to the project. So thanks again, Renfei and Mesbah, for sharing some of the stuff you've been doing lately. And I guess we'll call it. Thanks very much. March 8th already. Thanks,
Thanks, Philip.
everyone. Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, bye.